Hi, my name is Dr. Linda Lay, and I'm welcoming everyone to our monthly webcast, CV Sorority, Sisterhood, and Surgery. Today we will be discussing resilience and overcoming obstacles, women on the frontier. And I want to thank the panelists for joining us, since this is not a routinely discussed topic. And now in the times of COVID, we need resilience more than we need hand sanitizer. Resilience is defined as the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress. It is defined as one's emotional strength, whether it be in your professional setting or your personal setting. And our panelists that we invited today define this definition. Everyone here has held or currently has held positions such as Chief of Division, past presidents of societies, and program directors of vascular training programs. And you've all made many impressive contributions in vascular surgery, and you make it look easy, even though I know it wasn't. And I'm really interested in hearing from you all today how you climbed over all these hurdles and obstacles and have gotten to where you are today. And I'm sure Palma would agree with this.
Thank you, Linda. It's really a pleasure to have these wonderful females here today. And we were talking earlier that it's not just about the women. There are many very supportive men who have been instrumental in our lives, and they may comment about their mentors in this process. Today we have Amy Reed, who's at the University of Minnesota. As Joann Lohr, I think, dropped off, but should be coming back. Linda Harris in Buffalo, New York, and Cynthia Shortell at Duke University in North Carolina. We're really happy to have you here today. I really want to say that it is an honor, a real privilege to have you here. I sincerely and deeply mean that. Each of you has, at different points of my career, have been incredibly supportive of me in different ways at different times, whether you may realize it or not. And it may have been just a cup of coffee we had, and then I think back about it, and it's been very special for me. And I know that you've done that for many women, and you should be applauded for that. And I really just cannot emphasize that enough. So thank you very, very much for everything. And Joann is coming back, so thank you for that. Okay, so as women, we really juggle a lot of things. We're the ultimate multitaskers. And in doing so, there's things such as just being a vascular surgeon is already a very big challenge, but often juggling a spouse, children, and other parts of your life and different challenges that arise can be hard. And I wanted to see if you would share some of your thoughts or experiences with us today about how maybe there was some adversity or challenge that you had overcome, and then how you're able to pivot and move forward to move to the next step, or maybe just take it as a stumble and then move up the ladder to the next rung. So we'd really appreciate that. So we're just going to go through some questions, and we'll go through the panel and see if you can give us some insight. So really interesting concept of being mentally strong. I mean, it's on YouTube. There's actually a TED video on it. But what about being mentally strong and being a female vascular surgeon? Sometimes we fail and we get up, and it has to become almost a part of our lives, and it makes us stronger. And I'd just like to see how you may have found failure to be a part of your journey in becoming a leader and a mentor for other women in vascular surgery. So, Amy, you look very pensive. Would you like to start?
Thank you, Palma. Well, there's a lot I could unpack for all that. I think thinking about adverse times and how you handle it, I think I want to say that we all start from the same place, from a vascular surgery training and becoming vascular surgeons, and everybody starts there and brings their own background and how they grew up and their families and what sort of difficulties they may have been through that help prepare them a little bit for some of the resiliency. That said, it is I would have to say a difficult process as you become a vascular surgeon, and there's going to be failure. That's part of the game. And so being able to pick yourself up after that, I think, requires, from a clinical standpoint, with challenging outcomes, patients' deaths, grafts go down, things become infected, having someone to talk to that's a colleague, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a colleague at your institution, but I find it personally helpful for that sometimes to not be your spouse, even if your spouse is in medicine. Sometimes that's nice if it's somebody different, but I think having a trusted colleague who understands that, and again, that can be in your group, it can be anywhere, and I think that helps tremendously. But I think we all have adversity, and you have to, I think my thing is always, you plan on adversity. Don't sort of feel like it's never going to happen to you, because it will always, no one goes through life unscathed. So that's what I sort of try to, not think that I'm any different than anybody else. I have adverse things happen, and we all do, and you just have to have help from colleagues and friends and family who can understand what you're going through. But I'll let some of the others address some of it as well.
That's really incredible, right? Anticipate adversity, right? That's great. Joann, do you have any thoughts to add to that?
I think the biggest thing is to know yourself and to know what your goals are. And if you have a conviction and you really have a goal that you want to achieve, there'll be people that'll try to tell you can't do it, or you shouldn't do it, or it's a bad choice. But you have to know your inner soul, and you have to look at your strengths and weaknesses and how you cope with things. I think you're going to find a network of people around you. And very early on, I had support from the least likely places that you would ever dream of. Specifically, after I managed to find a surgery residency, which nobody wanted me, I'm the oldest one, I think, on this panel. I was in a program that still didn't want me, and the scrub tech and the OR tech and the circulating nurses adopted me. And I would ask for an instrument, and they would hand me something different than I'd asked for. And after the case, I'd say, Judy, I asked for this, and you always gave me the right thing. She goes, honey, I've been doing his cases.
Oh.
Uh-oh.
We lost Joann?
She's having storms in her area, apparently.
Oh. Okay. Well, that sounded like a great story. I wanted to hear the ending.
We'll let Linda pick up, and then we'll bring Joann back. I'm sure she'll jump back on.
Sure. So
I want to hear the end of that thought. So
absolutely. I think there are a couple of things. One of the things that I've learned over time is that we need to be a little bit more honest with ourselves. Women tend to take failures harder than men in general. This is how we were conditioned as we've grown up, and there have been studies, research on this. So if we lose a patient and a guy loses a patient, we blame ourselves more than they do. They get over it much faster. Just like with sports, they play a game, they lose, they get over it. We tend to internalize. So we need to step back a little from that. It doesn't mean that you don't accept the failure and look back and say, did I make a mistake? Just like if you have a failure in anything you're doing, whether it's patient care, your academics, research, whatever, but we can't dwell on it. We need to move past it. So part of it is being able to step back yourself, look honestly at yourself, and then have some mentors or friends, as other people have said, who will look honest. You don't want just the naysayers, because they're just going to demoralize you. But you also don't want just the cheerleaders, because you need someone who's going to be honest and say, you know what, you did mess up. This is what you did wrong. If someone's just a cheerleader all the time, it doesn't help you. You will fail. If you have not failed yet, you haven't done it enough. We say this all the time with surgery, that if you haven't had a complication, you haven't done enough for the procedure. That's true for everything in life. Every one of us have had failures and setbacks. It's how you handle those failures and setbacks, and whether you take it to heart too much and give up, or you say, as Joann was saying, this is my goal, I'm going to get there. And you just have to reassess the path to get there. And do you need to take another path, or keep chipping at the same way you were going? So.
I can't wait to rewatch this video so I can write all these things down. These are great. This is just amazing. Cindy, fill us in. Let us know what you're thinking.
Oh, well, I don't know how much I have to add to all the great things that have already been said, but one of the things that I do in my job right now as Executive Vice Chair of the Department of Surgery and formerly Chief of Staff is I do a lot of work with faculty that have had difficulties, that have had disruptive behavior or any other type of problems. And I find that people tend to think they're the only ones, if they had a complaint about them in the operating room, or people think they're difficult, male or female, I'm talking about now, they think, it's the worst thing in the world. They're the only one that's ever happened to. And one of the things I tell people is, look, everybody has stuff. There's nobody that doesn't have their stuff. This just happens to be your stuff that we're working on right now. And we just don't know about all the other things that each of us struggle with. So don't think of it as a mark of something that ruins you or makes you terrible. It's just the thing that you need to work on, just like other people have their things that they need to work on. And I think if I'd known that a long time ago for myself, I think it takes away a lot of the sting of failure and obstacles of just, I think, so that's a little bit of what Linda was saying. It's also similar to what I think Amy was saying, that life is, don't expect that life isn't going to throw curveballs at you. Of course it will. And it is a bit about how you process it. If you process it with a feeling of hope and self-belief, you'll be able to, I think, overcome much more rapidly than if you process it with a feeling of shame and self-loathing. And I guess I think I don't know. One other thing I was going to mention that felt really important, but I can't recall it. So I'll get back to you. But yeah, I think those are the main things that I just wanted to bring up.
That is so true, though. Everybody has their stuff, whether they air it out in the open or it's a secret. But and speaking of stuff, would you guys like to share maybe a failure, a personal obstacle that you overcame and how you overcame it, and let us in on the secrets? Amy?
Well, I've had some massive failures in my personal life that then became my professional life, and then kind of back. And, and I think this is an area where I got divorced, and divorce is a very difficult thing, and sadly not uncommon in women surgeons. And I would have to say that I was married to another surgeon, and married to another surgeon and having a family and children is a very difficult, challenging situation that is a delicate balance of, particularly if you have you're two academic surgeons, whose career is going to go first, or who's accelerating, who's not, who's being promoted, who's not. And that can kind of go up and down, and it can be very glaring, particularly if you as the woman maybe make more money or doing more things, and it can be a very challenging environment. And I'll just say, I was in the middle of I moved to my first chief job. Professionally, I felt like I was doing well. I had been on the vascular surgery board for 3 years, like half of my tenure there. And my personal life was not going very well. And as you mentioned, and Cindy alluded to earlier about shame, nobody wants to air their dirty laundry of what's happening at home. And so I knew what was going on with me at home and how horrible my family and personal life was. But, people, I'd be damned if I'm going to show that around the country. And so it became, until it became a breaking point, and I had to get divorced in a horrible divorce in a very small environment where everybody knew your business, and then deal with my ex getting remarried, and then having his office moved right next to mine. It was a disaster.
Oh my!
And I went to a rebound job, which was not very good, and it was horrid. And but I landed in a better spot eventually, both personally and professionally, and learned a lot about some of the things. But I think it's everybody's got their issues, not just that. But I think your personal life, it can really bubble up, and no matter how much we try to keep that separate, it can definitely impact.
What was your one regret about that whole situation you were in?
So, I think when I look back, there were some other, extra things going on that were a problem. But I think it is very difficult to fully express, I think, in a relationship and marriage, again, as like a two surgeon, sometimes even two physician, but two academically oriented physicians, and who's getting the better, who got the best job, who moved because of that, and so I think if I look back at it, there wasn't enough, like a lot of things we deal with in clinical and in personal, is not enough communication about it, and so there were a lot of things swept under the rug to kind of keep the peace, and in retrospect, sometimes you're exhausted after your long day, and the last thing you want to do is come home and have some, hour-long conversation. Your toddler's not going to bed, and then to sit down and say, "Oh, let's talk about our relationship." But you just have to find the time, and I think things just over time, got swept under the rug and to a boiling point. Mm-hmm. And so I think open and honest communication about what's going on, it can be very difficult. And I don't have the magic answer. I got remarried. I don't have the magic answer now, but I think more communication has helped me, I feel like.
And Linda, any thoughts on one of your failures, without making you uncomfortable or airing your dirty laundry?
I was going to talk about the health issue, which a number of people are already aware here, that I went through a cancer about a decade ago, breast cancer, which obviously was very stressful for me. I went through surgery, radiation, and chemotherapy. And actually, one of the things that happened is I missed one meeting from my regional society, and because of the cancer, and I got removed from the council when I was supposed to still be on. And it was one of those, oops, it was a mistake. And a number of people knew that the reason I wasn't there, I hadn't missed a meeting in years. I'd been there every single year religiously. I participated in everything. I was going through recovery from the surgery, and I was in chemotherapy, and I didn't go to one meeting, and suddenly was off the council. And it did get replaced once they found out. They went, "Oh my goodness, sorry, we made a mistake." But it took years to catch back up from that. Going through that process was very eye-opening. And one of the things that I started looking at is we sometimes neglect to take care of ourselves. We're so busy with taking care of our patients, taking care of our families, taking care of our children's. The last thing that gets taken care of is our own needs. And I kind of had to step back a little bit and start paying attention to, I needed to make sure I had time for myself. Read a lot about that and made sure that I wasn't internalizing too much, because sometimes if you internalize too much, whether it's anger, frustration, whatever, there is some evidence that it impacts your own immune system, and that cancers are related to that sort of thing as well. So being able to do some meditation to let some of it go, no matter how you take it out, whether it's communicating with someone else, whether it's sports, whether it's relaxation, but you have to do something. So physically that was very traumatic for me to go through the whole process. But in addition, I saw other things, and I was very cautious at work that I didn't lose standing at my local level, which I didn't. But in the national and regional level, as I said, I had a setback for no good reason, because people didn't communicate, and it's just easier to push someone away when they weren't there for 1 year. So that was very stressful for me, going through that whole process. But I did learn, and now I make sure that no matter what I do, I take some time for myself, and I exercise on a regular basis. I watch what I eat, and I really focus on that, because I don't want to go through that process again. And some of it's genetic. You can't control that, like we tell our patients all the time, but you can control what you can't control. And that's your own thought process, your own health, and all those other activities.
And Joann is back.
Yeah, I'm sorry, we have bad weather here, so I may cut out again.
Okay. And also, as a reminder, please, if y'all have if you have any questions, please text DeBakey to 37607, or the online, it's pollev.com /DeBakey, and we will have those questions up at the end. And so anyway, Joann, so you missed our, with the bad weather, we were discussing, everyone had a story of their own obstacle or failure and how they overcame that. whether it be professional or personal?
I think one of the biggest disappointments is that I'm in a combination. I was in a combination practice that had both an academic and a private practice component. And when it came to promotion and advancement, I was bypassed and a younger person with fewer credentials was selected. And I think that it was very difficult to not be bitter and to not be angry about it. But in the end, it probably has helped me realize that this probably wasn't the right place for me. And my current job, which I have just moved to here in the last year, is so much better fit. And so, again, I think you have to look at why things happen, whether it's perception, whether it's performance, whether it's lack of research or lack of specific areas of interest, and look at your soul and be honest with yourself. I think one of the hardest things we do in not only trying to establish relationships with other people, but is to have an honest intellectual conversation with ourselves and acknowledge both our weaknesses and our strengths and how we cope with those moving forward.
Very, very good advice. Cynthia, when we talk about coping and knowing yourself, was it hard for you, going up the ladder to let things go? I know we're all type A personalities and it's hard for all of us to let things go, but how do you deal with, my priority list and deciding what to fight for and what not to fight for?
Yeah, I think the idea of letting things go is a really good question. And one of the things that I was thinking that actually reminded me of one of the points I wanted to make earlier, but as other people were talking about obstacles and setbacks, and even Joann just asking about why things happen, I think in my personal life and my professional life, one of the really most important lessons that I've learned is that almost always the things that have seemed to be the very worst things at the time have turned out to be some of the best things that ever happened to me. So for instance, early on in my career, wanted to be a fellow. My husband had already taken a job where we were, and the current division chief would not accept a woman into his fellowship. So I was stuck in the lab for 2.5 years until there was a new division chief who was willing to take the first woman. But guess what? During those almost 3 years, that's when I did all of the research that I'd ever done in my life. And that's why you're talking to me today, because otherwise I would be in private practice. I would never have had any idea of being interested in research or academics. And another example of that was a big disappointment when I thought that I should be division chief of my prior institution, but was sort of very much dismissed by the new department chair there, and that was really hard. But that's when the opportunity to be division chief at Duke came along, and it turned out to be, as Joann mentioned, just my professional life, that's when it really started, was when I moved to Duke. So I think being open to what life is presenting to you and not being tied to any one thing, I think is one of the most important things that I've learned along the way.
And Palma, I know you and I have personally talked about obstacles and failures in your personal life. Any final thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I think I want to write down everything they just said on a paper and read it every single day, because that's exactly, you go through a divorce, it's incredibly stressful and it impacts your work and everything you do, and you feel very isolated. And it's nice to know that there are people around that, you're not alone. It's so important. And just like Cindy just said, other people have these things happen. You're not the only person that kind of screwed up, or you're not the only person going through this. And it makes a very big difference if you actually can internalize that. And it's not intuitive to everybody. And I think it's hard. And I cannot possibly admire these women any more than I already do. And now it's like 10 times more than I did. I so appreciate everything that you've all said so far, and I just thank you for that. I do.
We admire you too, Palma.
Oh, thank you.
I think one thing that many people have said that's very important is the positive attitude. You know, we can look at any failure and say, I'm bad, I didn't do well, whatever. But when you look at the way Cindy and some of the others have said, it was meant to be for some reason, and you look forward, and oftentimes those things that you thought were not going to be right are the things that are really the most important, and it does turn into the best thing in your life. And if you look at it negatively, I don't think it would have. If you had said this is horrible and gotten frustrated and gotten down on yourself, you probably would not have succeeded. Instead, you took a positive attitude and you turned a loss into a win. And I think that's really important for all of us.
Yeah, the flexibility to have your mind bend that way and think that way is so important. Because if you can really get so down on the shaming and self-loathing that Cindy mentioned earlier, that it can dig you into a deep hole. And understanding of trying to say, okay, pick yourself up, just as you do, you know, if you lose a patient, you pick yourself up and you do another case, and then you get back on the horse. And I think in life has to be the same way. And it's hard, but I think it's so true, Linda. Just trying to maintain as positive an attitude as you can.
Absolutely.
Do you consider yourself a risk taker? Joann, we can start with you.
I think we're all risk takers, just by the definition of what we do and where we are and how we started on this journey and where we're ending up. And I think that the hardest thing we do is change. None of us are good at change. None of us like change, and we're all afraid of change. But a lot of times, as we've just heard and we've just talked about, change is the best thing you can do to move yourself forward. And again, you just have to stay centered with what your goals are and your inner core, because it's like a pebble in the pond. If you're not good in the center, nothing around it is good. But if you're really solid in your centering in your own mind, then everything else around you can be a positive.
Linda?
I agree. I think we're all risk takers because in order to succeed, you have to put yourself out there. And if you put yourself out there, you're going to fail at least some of the time. And you have to be prepared for that. I mean, this has been said before, but if you want to be safe, you do things where you're not challenging yourself. And part of what I think we all love about Vascular is it changes, and we have to constantly challenge ourselves. You know, if we didn't like that, we would have gone into something that was more of a boring field where things are repetitive and it's not a challenge. And not only are we doing a procedure or procedures and taking care of patients that are challenging, but academically and clinically, we put ourselves in positions where we're being challenged. You know you're going to fail sometimes, but yes, that is taking risks. We're taking risks on a regular basis, and your own internal strength has got to be there to accept you're not going to win every time. As a matter of fact, you're going to lose quite a few times before you win. But if you don't keep pressing forward, you're never going to win.
And you never grow if you don't take risks and move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That's so key. I was going to just say that I think there's no growth if you're not. I always tell faculty, if you don't have some slight discomfort, or if everything's easy and comfortable, you're not going to grow. And so you always need some slight discomfort about something. You're like, a little concern, or am I doing this right, or things. If you don't put yourself out there a little bit, you're not going to grow. And to Linda's point, sometimes you fail, but you don't fail every time. And so that's why I think we all have to, a little bit of risk taking is surgeons, of even, stepping up to the table and doing the operation. There's risk in that. There's, we tell our patients that, but that's, I think, how we grow in a defined kind of risk pattern. You're going to get growth then, which we all want.
And that is actually one of the characteristics of resilience, is being uncomfortable, being comfortable with the uncomfortable. So, and resilience is not always, genetic. I mean, a lot of people talk about, learning to be resilient and throughout your life. And so what kind of advice, Cynthia, would you give, residents or trainees starting off, because I do think that resilience is very important, not in your personal life, but also being a vascular surgeon, because it's a very humbling subspecialty. And, one day you could just feel like you're on top of the world, and the next day, a simple access case can just tear you down. So what advice would you give the millennials nowadays to learn how to be resilient going forward?
Yeah, no, I think I tell all of those interested in vascular surgery or those struggling in vascular surgery that vascular is not a specialty for the faint of heart. I mean, it's it just as you say, you save that ruptured aneurysm, and then the next day something awful happens to that patient or a different patient that you thought was going to be something simple. So without a doubt, I think it's a hard field, but that is also, life is hard that way too. I mean, just when you think everything's going great. So I guess I would say the most important element of resilience is self-belief. And that means that you have to trust yourself to know, if I feel that I need a break, and I'm not going to do the best on this next operation, if I don't take a rest, or if I know that, I need to do this many workouts in a week, that I know myself the best of anyone, and I have to believe in myself enough to know what I need in order to be well. And to be brave enough to say that. And so I think one of the things that's been really hard for me, and particularly I think surgeons of my generation, is that those things are very hard to say, because we were raised, if you will, to believe that you never slept, the more cases the better, you never took care of yourself, if you got divorced that was great, you should never have children or any of those things, and you should certainly never say you were tired. So having to model that behavior in the role that I have now has been very hard, but valuable, if that answers your question.
Yes. Yeah, things have definitely changed over the years with, how we think about burnout and signs of weakness and not showing signs of weakness. I know, Palma, you've told me some things when we've talked many times about what people would say to you, and it's just incredible, because now you would totally get fired if that happened nowadays, if you had reported it. But anyways, and Palma, do you have any other questions for them?
So I guess I'd like to know if they want to. Well, first of all, I do want to hear Joann end of her story about.
Oh yeah.
Your question, because we were all sitting on the edge of our seat.
Yeah.
And then
what did Judy say? What did Judy say?
Oh my God. Anyway, so Joann could finish, and then she could lead into maybe what some of her biggest challenges and the biggest rewards have been, because, I have medical students all the time, these very young women, and they want to go into vascular surgery, and I'm encouraging them to go into vascular surgery. And some days it's really hard to be positive about being a vascular surgeon, just like you've all alluded to. You're tired, you've had a tough day, somebody upset you, somebody made a comment. It's hard to shrug it off all the time. But at the end of the day, I mean, we are happy that we've done this, and we're happy that we're here. And I just kind of wanted to hear what was the biggest challenge, but what are the biggest rewards, and what would you say to these people to encourage them to become a vascular surgeon? So Joann, finish your story for us.
To finish the story, the scrub tech, and they were both African-American ladies, and I was in Detroit, and they looked at me and they said, "You just be here and be ready, and we'll make you look good." And so the point was to accept assistance from some of the places you least likely expected it from, and to be gracious to those that try to help you, and to those that try to tear you down, you be gracious as well. Because everybody that tells you something negative, you have to find the positive in how you can grow from what the negative feedback is. And what, to me, the best reward and the biggest privilege we do is being vascular surgeons, taking care of patients and having patients be loyal, having them bring back all of their family members and taking care of several generations, and walking in to see some giant 6'7" star ball player all tensed up and having him tell you, thank you for coming to help me. And it's 3:00 in the morning and you can see the tension go out of his face and out of his shoulders. And you realize that the privilege we have is one that we should always be prepared for, never take for granted, continue to learn and grow, and your patience will make you strong and keep you whole. I lost a patient and it was very hard. It was one of those eggshell aortas and the clamp tore through the calcium and it was a disaster. And I always have, when I lose a patient, a family counseling after things happen. And the family was more concerned about me than what had happened to their father. And they actually ministered to me at that family meeting. And I will always remember that because they were so worried I wouldn't be able to get back on the horse and do another case. And so be gracious, be appreciative, and count your blessings.
Great advice.
Amy?
So I think for what I tell students these days is, I think being a vascular surgeon has such incredible variety of what we do. And from a technical standpoint, I think there's no better career in surgery that deals with such a vast array of technology, open and endo. And so I kind of go through that a little bit. But I think from we are still very much long-term caregivers of vascular disease, and I think students who want a long-term relationship with their patients, I think that's a great thing about our field. Doesn't mean I see them back every single year, but our team of people is involved, and I'm involved. And I think there's something to be said about helping your fellow man, certainly with the vascular disease, but your fellow surgeon with regard to helping out in the operating room, whether it's electively with spines or exposures for tumors, or coming in to help with bleeding. And so I think I tell them, there's a lot of, it's a very, I think, rich, broad, rewarding career in surgery. And I never come in and say, oh, I'm bored, or I'm doing this same thing, or various things like that. And I think to other people's points, there's going to be down times, and I try to make sure that when I'm going to work with a student, that I'm projecting as much a positive, putting on a positive image as much as I can, and realize, okay, there's going to be a time I'm not with the students where okay, I'll have that other part of it, because I can't have that, 24/7 they're going to be with me, because we all can't have, you're not going to be that way the whole time. There's going to be, you're tired and that type of thing. But I do try to make when I look at saying, okay, somebody's going to spend a week with me, that we're doing positive things and saying, yeah, sometimes it's tough, but there's tough conversation things. So I still think the clinical aspect, and then, I counsel medical students that just say, you don't want to get to be where I'm in middle age and say, gosh, I wish, what if I had done something different? And I can remember this when I was a student vividly, where some of my classmates were like, oh, I'm going to do radiology, or I'm going to do that. Nothing against it. It's just they wanted a really good lifestyle. And I said, that's fine, I'm sure, but you can make the lifestyle what you want to make of it. And that's where I see there's so much opportunity in vascular surgery. And I just you'd rather be happy and interested in what you're doing, and maybe recreate yourself as a vascular surgeon in different areas, or take a special interest in certain areas or clinical problems in vascular, and have that be your new kind of area to focus on. And so I think just really trying to be passionate about it, as we all are. And I think realizing we're only human. We're never going to be a positive 100% of the time. That would be crazy to show people, but we don't want to be complaining so much about our field that it turns them off, because it does seem to be a thing that students pick up on. And we see that time and time again in polls and surveys for trainees of, nobody seemed happy. We just did some DVS survey, and they said, why didn't you choose, somebody put in, they actually polled who didn't choose vascular surgery but went into surgery, and they're like, why didn't you choose vascular surgery? And they said, because none of the vascular surgeons seemed happy. So, you know, you have to kind of think about those things. You're on display a little bit with the trainees and students, and they know it's not going to be 100% positivity, but you want to portray that for sure.
That's great. Linda?
I think what Joann and Amy have said is very true. I think there are a couple other things that I try to tell the students and trainees. Number one, we like immediate satisfaction. That's one of the beautiful things about our field is you do something and you immediately see how much better the patients are. And similar to what Joann was saying, I can't tell you how many patients and family members hug me because I've made a difference in their life or their father or mother or a relative of one sort or another. And then you have that long-term interaction. They know me. Some of them have known me since I had my daughter, who's 25 years old. I mean, they'll ask me how old my daughter is and how she's doing, and then they're surprised that she's an adult already. But you have a long-term relationship, and yet you make immediate changes and you get results immediately, and that's really very gratifying for us. And I think, you know, Amy's point too, you do want to be aware of what you're projecting for yourself. We all love what we do. That's why we do it. You know, I wouldn't be here if I didn't enjoy what I do. Now, do you enjoy it 24/7? Of course not. There are days or times when you're exhausted. It's 2 a.m. Do you really feel like getting up and driving to the hospital? No one does. But on the other hand, when you save the person who's ruptured, you feel amazing afterwards. You've saved someone's life. You've done something amazing. You put up with a little exhaustion. That's not a problem. And I think we do need to convey that to the trainees. The field is also, as I said before, never boring. It's changing. If you don't like that, it's the wrong field. But it's something that's changing, and so we have to constantly learn and be challenged. And we're all type A. We're all people who want to be challenged. We want to learn. We don't want to just sit back and say, okay, nothing to do. I don't have to learn. So if you don't like being challenged, again, then it's not the right field to go into. The other thing that most of us are involved with is teaching. And I love that just as much because, you know what? I can make a difference in many people's lives. But I can't make near the difference that I can if I train 10, 15, 20, 30 other people, because every person I train becomes a spoke off the wheel and they can impact so many more people. So that's another major part that I love. I love seeing the light bulb go on people's heads when they go, wow, I love vascular surgery. I want to do this. And we have students and residents come through, and we actually do pretty well in our location with getting kids into vascular because we all love what we do. And as a matter of fact, I had someone ask the other day, they have a PhD for education in our department now. He said, well, how is it that everyone in vascular likes to teach and is so good at it? And I went, we enjoy what we do. We all love it. And so we want to portray that to the next generation. We want to teach them. And, you know, so it's really a matter of enjoying everything that you're doing about life and showing that off.
Cindy?
Great advice. And so y'all are all such strong women professionally, and again, holding, you know, departments and chiefs, you know, chief of surgery. Do you feel like you are that as strong and resilient in your personal lives as well? I mean, it sounds like it to me, just from everyone's, but, you know, I'm always curious, like, you know, when we go to these meetings and I look at, you know, the strong female surgeons who are department heads and, you know, they're giving their talks, and I just wonder, like, you know, you're so, you know, intimidating, and everybody looks up to you and wants to be like you, and wow, like, you know, they probably never show a side of weakness. So, you know, is there a, you know, you're on your personal life, are you just as strong? Do you feel that way?
Well, hopefully we're not intimidating. I don't think any of us want to intimidate other people.
No, not intimidating in the, I should rephrase that, but just like, you know, you know, when we look at trainees, like when I was a trainee, I would look at you guys like, wow, like I want to be like them. How did they get there? You know, I mean, they're just so impressive. Like, you know, it just an amazing, you know, strength when you see you're at the meetings. And so I just wanted to know personally, are you just that strong?
I think what you have to look at least what I look for, is finding a significant other that was equally strong in different ways. Because, you know, I still remember in college even, I didn't want to date someone that resented me or couldn't handle my intelligence or my work ethic. So I used to, it may sound stupid, I used to play sports. I used to play racquetball, and I was pretty competitive. So if a guy couldn't take it that I could beat him, and I wasn't going to date him. You know, and if he beat me, I was totally okay with that too. But if he was so upset by that, then I knew a relationship wasn't going to work, because how is he going to handle me being a surgeon, me having, you know, different hours and possibly making more money than him? I mean, you have to find a person who can stand up to you and be your equal, because if you don't have equality in a relationship, then I think you're going to have difficulty. And it doesn't mean they're making the same amount of money. It doesn't matter. My husband stays home. That was our personal decision many years ago. And because of that, I was able to have a family and raise children, because I wasn't worried that the children weren't being taken care of. But he's very strong, and he'll come back at me if I'm out of line. And you need to be able to have that, where the person you're in love with and the person you're with can stand up to you and not make it a negative, but a positive.
I think I try to, at home, be much more of what I call a type B personality. And so I sort of feel like, okay, at work I run a lot of things and direct a lot of things, but I feel like, okay, maybe at home my husband can run the home or direct the, you know, so I sort of like, I don't want to be all, so at there, you know, certainly there's compromise, and there's compromise at work as well, but I think I do feel like I'm a strong person, and for certain things, definitely I will say, okay, I want to put the flowers here and I'm getting these and I'm putting them there, and I want the bird feeder to go in there, and if you're not going to help me, I'm going to do it. But I think I try to feel like, okay, it's like anything, like picking your battles. So I sort of feel like, depending on, you know, your home life situation, what, you know, what your spouse is doing and where they are in their career, you know, I feel like I'm a little more flexible at home to say I don't have to win all the time. And you know, I'm sure at work I probably feel like I want to win more, but at home I'm like, okay, is that really the biggest thing? And I try to bear in mind, I think one piece of advice I'll just share, that John Manick, who used to be he was an early president in the Vascular Societies and was my mentor, and he was my chair of the department when I first went to the Brigham as a general surgery resident. And as I got into vascular and he retired, and he just passed away this last year, and he, you know, recognized a lot of us who, like all Linda was mentioning, type A, but he came up to me after one vascular conference and he said, Amy, don't let them write, I did 1,000 FemPops on your gravestone. And I thought, what the heck does that mean? And it took me a little while to sort of think, you know, that's exactly right, is that, you know, I think it's a perfect statement to kind of balance, you know, when you retire and you go on, you want to have a life, you want to have a family and friends and people that you can go to. And, you know I'm not going to be, when I retire, I'm not going to be the person coming back to Grand Rounds every week or checking in on Zoom. I might go to some meetings, maybe not even that. But so that's where that always, I think of that statement often to say, yeah, that your family life and your home life is equally as important. You want a great career, but if you don't have family when you retire and there's nothing there, it's a lonely existence if you don't have friends and family to help you.
I've been married to the same person for 40 years. And when we were dating, my husband, we were in college, was cleaning operating rooms. So he knew physicians and surgeons before I became one. And, you know, you talk about compromise and being a type B at home. And I tried that to the point that my husband one night looked at me and goes, you never make a decision about anything. We were talking about where to go to dinner. And it's like, I don't care where we go to dinner. It's like, it's not that big of a deal, you know. I'm not going to cut off your leg if we don't go to dinner at X, Y, and Z. And so it's all about picking your battles, but it's also about finding the right significant other that will let you be you and will be able to be whole when you stand them up or you're not there or you don't make the function that you were supposed to because something else got in the way. And so I think that the hard part about personal stuff is figuring out how to compromise and when to compromise.
Mm-hmm. Cynthia, any final thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I think strength at home and in your personal life looks very different in many ways than strength on the podium or in DNC or in the operating room where, I mean, and I don't actually think in all aspects of work that it needs to look the same, but I think strength can be weakness too. I think in certain situations you want for people to understand that a leader isn't just someone who's always up there perfect. A leader is someone who has their blind spots like everyone else, who has their failings like everyone else. You don't want to be putting it out there that at home or at work that you think everyone, the only good person is a perfect person. So I think bringing that into your relationships at home is at least as important as it is to be strong. I think the compassionate humanity part, that goes importantly in both places.
And all of us, I think, have been home a lot recently. So it's really tested our personal relationships with our significant others. And let's see, do we have any questions, Tyree? No, okay. And so our hour is almost up. Palma, any last minute thoughts or comments?
I just wanted to say to each of the panelists, did you, when you were an intern or a resident, could you have imagined that you would be where you are now? So whether it's 15 or 20 or 25 years, could you have envisioned that, or it just sort of happened? Because I feel like I just don't know really where I'm going. I just kind of keep, hey, there's an opportunity, I'm going to take it. Oh, I fell down. Well, I'm just going to get back up again, and I fall more than I actually stand up sometimes. But I was just curious if you had this like vision from the beginning, or how you sort of moved along. So, Joann,
Well,
you're the senior person.
vascular surgery didn't exist when I was doing my general surgery training. It became a specialty in 1987. And it was an opportunity then, and I look at it as an opportunity now. I had no idea that I wanted to do this. And the truth is, I'd have rather been a vet, but Wisconsin didn't have a vet school. So here I am. And I think that you get, like the driftwood or the bottle in the ocean, some things that happen to you change your path, and you have to be willing to accept direction and intervention from other people around you. The path you start out on may not be the one you end up on.
Mimi?
Yeah, I think I look at it as just as you said, and say, wow. I mean, I grew up on a farm to parents who never went to college, and and I think, wow, how did you get here? But life's a series of choices, and and as we said earlier, the risk taking of, you say, I'm going to try it. What's the worst? I fail and I try something else. And I think nobody was ordained to become this. You just kind of made these choices at the fork in the road, and then you chose the path and said, let me try it. And it's all about, I think, trying different things, and it leads to different opportunities. And so I think it's the rare person that just wakes up and like, oh yeah, I'm going to be this, and I'm going to be great. And I don't know, there's probably very few, but it's just as you said, little things happen, and you don't always see where you're going, but you say, okay, it looks positive. I'm going to just keep going and keep trying.
Linda?
I didn't know what I was going to do when I was younger. I mean, when I was much younger, I was extremely shy. I was afraid to speak in public, believe it or not. And I forced myself to overcome that because I knew that was going to be a hindrance. But when I started in surgery, I had no clue I was going into vascular. And once I got into vascular, I didn't know I was going to be academic, and I certainly didn't foresee where my career was going at that point. Again, series of opportunities, and I took advantage of the opportunities as I went. And I kind of, every time an opportunity opens up, I look at the positives and negatives, and do I want to go for it or don't I want to go for it? But no, I couldn't have anticipated this 20 some years ago, not by any means.
Cindy?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, not at all. I think when I was first in general surgery and then in vascular surgery, it was just, could I survive? Could I get through it? And I see you laughing, Linda, but really, I mean, I wasn't even sure if I could be trained. So, you know, I think just putting one foot in front of the other is kind of what it was for me.
And
Great
Linda,
advice. Yeah, take it.
yeah, what about
Take
you?
it. Well, right now I'm taking it day by day. So, and that's what I've been doing, and you know, because eventually, you know, you'll get to the next day and you'll get through it. So, yeah, definitely this time in my life personally has tested my resilience. But, you know, I realized that being patient is something that I am not good at, but I'm learning to be. And just for everyone's, you know, my baby's in the NICU, but babies have their own time, and you're no longer in control at all, and you just have to hurry up and wait. So personally, I've learned to be patient in this time, and that's, you know, I'm growing as a person and being resilient because of her. So. And Palma, any final thoughts before we end the show on how you're resilient?
I can't thank these women enough. And I mean, I usually, if I have really no clue where I'll end up in the end, but hopefully it's somewhere good. But I find that I usually, if there's an easy route and a hard one, I usually take the hard one for some reason. And then when I get through it, I'm like, oh, I did that. That's good. And I'll do the next one. So, no, it's all about the journey, right?
Yeah.
It's just a journey we're all on. And, you know, people jump in our lives and they're part of our journey, and they inspire us and motivate us and comfort us at different hard times. And again, it's like that. And there are just so many wonderful women in vascular surgery. And we have 4 beautiful, wonderful women here today, and Linda as well. So we're good.
Can I just add one other thing? And I think that is, if the concept of kindness rings home, the whole thing with this virus and everything that we've talked about, be kind to yourself, be kind to those around you, be kind to those that you cross paths with, even if you don't agree with them or you don't think they're treating you very kindly, and it comes back. And I think that having that kind of awareness will help you survive anything.
Mm-hmm.
Great points.
Yep, very true. Well, thank you everyone for joining us today. It was a great hour, and I learned a lot. I know Palma learned a lot. And so we'll see y'all soon.
Thank you so
Great.
much.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Have a good
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.